He smiled at her once. One time in 97 minutes. And the room didn't notice, but I did, because I was the only person in that room that nobody was watching. And that is the most dangerous thing you can be in a place like Sora. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, I was standing 6 feet from the service station with a water pitcher shaking hard enough to catch the candlelight, and I was looking at a man seated at a table that does not exist. Not figuratively. Table 6 at Sora has no reservation record, no entry in the system, no paper trail. I've worked here 11 months, and I have never once seen it on the books. But tonight, it's occupied. Tonight, Park Junho is sitting at it. And 14 people in this room have no idea what that means. I do. The private dining room at Sora costs $4,000 to reserve. It smells like black truffle and old money and the specific kind of silence that powerful people pay extra for. It seats 20. I know every seat. I know which senators request the corner position with the sight line to the door. I know which executives tip in cash so their assistants never see the receipt. I know which tables never appear in the reservation system because the guests at those tables are not the kind of people who leave records. Table 6 is one of those tables. Park Junho arrived at exactly 8 p.m., not 8:01, not 7:58, 8 p.m., and I should have understood right then what kind of precision tells you about a person. It isn't punctuality. Punctual people arrive a minute early, check their watch, exhale. Junho walked through the door at the exact second he intended to, the way a surgeon makes the first incision, not early, not late, because both are mistakes. He sat down. He did not look at the menu. Across from him, a woman in a silk dress the color of heavy cream. $6,000 of fabric minimum. I've been in this industry long enough to know. She smiled at him across the amuse-bouche, a real smile, the kind that costs something to produce. He gave him nothing back. Not coldness, not cruelty, something worse than both. Absence. Like trying to make eye contact with a photograph of someone who used to be alive. She kept smiling anyway. That was the first thing that didn't add up. We've all been in situations where someone doesn't match our energy, and we recalibrate. We look at our phone. We get quieter. We stop performing for an audience of one who isn't watching. But this woman in cream silk, she never stopped. 97 minutes, I counted. She talked and she smiled and she refilled her own wineglass with the composure of someone who had been briefed on exactly what this evening was going to look like. And I noticed all of it. Because nobody notices the waitress. That is the first thing you need to understand about what I do and what I saw that night. Invisibility is a skill set. You learn to move through a room like a current of air, present enough to be useful, forgettable enough to be honest. People say things in front of me they would never say in front of each other. They drop the performance between courses, and I am standing there, holding a pitcher, watching the real version of people that almost nobody gets to see. That night, I was watching Park Junho. And here is what I couldn't reconcile. He wasn't watching her. He was watching the door. Not the way you watch a door when you're expecting a late arrival, checking, glancing, resuming conversation. He watched it the way I've seen certain guests watch certain things in this room, with patience that isn't calm, patience that is controlled, the patience of a man counting down towards something he has already accepted as coming, and has decided in advance exactly what he will do when it arrives. By 9:30, I thought I had the whole picture. Business dinner. The woman in cream was a prop, a layer of social normalcy stretched over something that had nothing to do with romance. Junho was performing domesticity for an audience I hadn't identified yet. Maybe someone at another table. Maybe a camera I hadn't located. I almost relaxed. I told myself I understood the room. And then, because I am apparently the kind of person who walks toward the thing that everyone else is quietly walking away from, I volunteered to cover the room alone for the rest of the service.
That decision, that one small, unremarkable decision, that is the one I still can't explain. Because by 9:30, every other staff member had already found a reason to be somewhere else, and I had just made sure there was no one left in that room but me. Chaewon left at 9:15. I remember because she untied her apron at the service station, folded it in thirds the way she always does, and set it on the second shelf without making eye contact with anyone. She didn't say goodnight. Chaewon always says goodnight. Bomgi was gone by 9:20. He told the kitchen he had a headache. Bomgi has worked here 3 years and has never once left a shift early. And Hyung-sik, our senior floor manager, the man who has taken exactly one unscheduled break in 2 years that I know of, Hyung-sik disappeared at 9:22 p.m., 12 minutes before his scheduled break. 12 minutes he has never taken early before tonight and has not taken early since. I noticed all of this. I filed it under coincidence, because coincidence is comfortable, and comfort is something the human brain reaches for when the alternative is too heavy to hold. I poured water at table 4. I told myself it was a slow night. It wasn't a slow night. The woman in cream silk hadn't touched her food in 40 minutes. You need to understand what that means in a room like this. Nobody reserves a $4,000 private dining room and doesn't eat. Nobody sits across from a meal that costs more than most people's rent and lets it go cold. Unless eating was never the point. Unless sitting there, talking, performing the shape of a normal dinner, that was the only thing she came to do. I noticed that too. I kept my distance. And here is the thing about distance in a room that small. It's a choice that looks like professionalism, but is actually fear wearing a uniform. I was afraid. I didn't name it yet, but my body knew. My mouth was dry in the specific way it gets when something is wrong, and I haven't yet given myself permission to admit it. I poured water at table 4. I stayed near the service station. I watched Park Junho watch the door. And I told myself, this is not your room. These are not your people. You pour the water and you disappear, and in the morning, none of this will have a shape you recognize. I was wrong about all of it. But here's what I was most wrong about. I thought I was watching Park Junho. I was not watching Park Junho. For 97 minutes, while I studied him, his stillness, his control, the precise way he lifted his wine glass without drinking it, the woman in cream silk was studying me. Not him, me. She'd clocked me before I had clocked her. I understood this later, in the particular way you understand something that rearranges your entire skeleton, not as information, but as weight. She'd assessed me from across that room. She'd tracked my patterns. She knew where I stood, when I moved, how long I spent at each table, and how close I was willing to get to table 6 before I pulled back. She knew my radius before I knew I had one. She clocked me before I clocked her. Most people never see the trap until they're already standing in it. Don't be the last to understand how these stories end. Follow now, because what comes next is the part that changes everything. And then, at 9:44 p.m., she walked in through my kitchen. Not the entrance, not the front of house, through the kitchen, my kitchen. The one with the secondary entrance off the loading corridor that guests are never supposed to know exists. She was wearing my uniform. Black, simple, the kind of forgettable that takes effort to achieve. She carried nothing, and that was the first thing that was wrong, because we always carry something, a pitcher, a tray, a cloth, a reason. You don't walk through a working kitchen during service with empty hands. It marks you. It makes you visible in a room full of people who've been trained to assess what everyone around them is carrying. She carried nothing. And she walked like someone who knew exactly where she was going. Not the practiced casualness of someone trying to belong, but the compressed efficiency of someone for whom belonging is irrelevant. She was already past the point of needing to pass. Her eyes found the room's single camera in under 2 seconds. Then they found the blind spot.
I need you to understand what that means. I've worked in that building for 11 months. 11 months of Thursday nights and Saturday doubles and quiet weekday shifts where there's nothing to do but learn the architecture of a room. I found that camera's blind spot 11 days ago, accidentally. I was restacking linen, and I moved to the left, and I thought, oh, you can't see this corner from that angle. 11 months, 11 days ago. She found it in under 2 seconds, which means she had the floor plan, which means someone gave it to her, which means this, all of it, the empty reservation, the evacuated staff, the woman in cream silk who hadn't touched her food, none of it started tonight. This had been constructed, planned, loaded like a mechanism, and set in motion long before 8 p.m. Park Junho didn't choose Sora. Sora was chosen for him. I was standing 12 feet from table 6 with a water pitcher and a completely restructured understanding of what kind of room I was standing in. And here is what 12 feet feels like when the distance between witness and participant has just collapsed to nothing. It feels like standing at the edge of something you cannot see the bottom of and realizing you've already leaned too far forward to step back. She moved through the room toward table 6. She moved like someone who had tracked things that hide before. And the thing she was pressing into the fold of her sleeve, flat, dark, and wrong in the specific way that objects are wrong when they are designed to end something, disappeared against the black of her uniform as she walked. I had 4 seconds, maybe. 4 seconds before she reached him, before she leaned down, the way we do when the order is complicated and the room is loud, and did whatever she had come into my kitchen to do. My brain ran the options before I'd consciously decided to run them. I could call out, shout, alert the room. She would move before anyone reached her. I could do nothing. Tell myself I hadn't understood what I saw. Go home at 11:30. Sleep. wake up and read whatever version of events appeared in the news or didn't appear, because rooms like this and people like Junho rarely appear in the news. Or I could cross the floor. I crossed the floor. My legs moved before I finished deciding. My voice came out level and professional in a way that had nothing to do with how my body felt underneath it. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, sir. You asked for still water at the start of the evening." He looked up. The woman in the uniform stopped, straightened, her entire body recalibrated in one breath, the way water changes direction when the surface it's running toward is suddenly removed. She paused for 2.3 seconds. Then she turned and drifted back toward the kitchen the way smoke finds a vent, unhurried, purposeless-looking, and absolutely deliberate. The dark thing in her sleeve was gone. Park Junho looked at me, and for the first and only time in 97 minutes, he smiled. 1.3 seconds. I counted every one of them. It was not warmth, it wasn't gratitude, it wasn't even relief, it was recognition, the precise, specific recognition of a man who has spent his entire life identifying the only other person in a room who is actually seeing what's happening. And in that 1.3 seconds, I stopped being invisible. He saw me, fully, completely, without the professional distance I'd spent 11 months carefully maintaining, and I understood with nauseating clarity that this was not the first time he'd needed to find someone like me in a room like this, and it would not be the last. The smile disappeared. He picked up his wine glass. His date, the woman in cream silk who was not his date, resumed her sentence about something in Jeju, her voice smooth and continuous, as if no one had approached the table, as if the room had not just held its breath and exhaled. I walked back to the service station. My hands were still shaking. The pitcher was still catching the candlelight. By 11 p.m., the table was cleared. By 11:15, Park Junho and the woman in cream were gone. No goodbye, no signed receipt, no record that they had ever been there. Table 6 was reset. The candles were extinguished. The room smelled like black truffle and close calls, and something I didn't have language for yet. I told myself it was over. I stacked chairs. I did the work of ending a shift, the physical, methodical, comforting work of making a room look like nothing happened in it. And I filed the last 2 hours under the category I'd been building since I started this job, things I saw that were not mine to name. I was almost out the door. 11:23 p.m. A colleague from the kitchen, Ji-sun, who works the closing shift every Thursday for 4 years, mentioned, the way people mention things that seem small, that the second waitress had called in sick tonight, never came in. I stopped walking. She never came in. But I watched her walk through my kitchen. I watched her find a blind spot she should not have known existed. I watched her approach table 6 with something flat and dark pressed against her forearm. I watched her stop because I interrupted her and drift back through the kitchen and out through the loading corridor and into whatever comes after a plan fails. She was never on the schedule. Which means the uniform came from somewhere, which means someone with access to Sora's inventory, staff lists, shift schedules, floor plans, camera positions, had prepared for her, had placed her. Only people who stay until the end understand what's actually being asked of them here. Don't choose to stay in the dark. The next story is worse, and you'll want to know it first. My hand stopped moving. I stood in the middle of the dining room with a chair in each hand, and I let that sentence finish building itself in my head. Someone placed her there. and then the sentence that came after it, the one I'd been keeping at a distance for the last hour and a half, the one I hadn't let myself look at directly yet. Did someone place me there, too? I've thought about this question almost every day since. Here is what I've been able to reconstruct. The staff left before Junho arrived, not because they were scared. They didn't know enough to be scared. They left because they were told to, individually, in ways that felt organic, an early release, a fabricated headache, a break taken 12 minutes early. The room was cleared by someone who understood how to move people without appearing to move them. I was not moved. I volunteered, and now I have to sit with the question of whether those are the same thing. Park Junho came to Sora knowing the room would be cleared. He knew the second waitress, the real threat, the one he'd been warned about, would come through the kitchen at some point during service. He had accepted all of this as the cost of whatever this dinner was. But he also knew something else. He knew who would be working that room. He knew their 11-month pattern, the invisibility, the observational habit, the specific psychological tendency to notice things and act on them when others don't. He had factored them into his survival calculation. He had factored me in. He didn't smile because I was brave. He smiled because I was predicted, because somewhere, in whatever architecture supports a man like Park Junho, someone had said, there will be a person in that room who sees what's happening, and when the moment comes, they will move. And I did.
Could you live with that? Doing exactly the right thing, and then finding out it was never yours to choose? That it was written into someone else's plan before you even tied your apron? Comment below, because I've been asking myself for 11 months, and I still don't have an answer. Some of you will say it doesn't matter. The right thing was still done. The outcome was still good. The threat was still interrupted. Others will say that being used, even in service of something good, is its own kind of harm. That agency is not a small thing to lose. That the difference between choosing and being positioned to choose is the difference between dignity and utility. Drop your verdict. I want to know where you land. Because here is what I know for certain. The cost arrived 4.3 seconds after the smile disappeared. I was no longer invisible. Whatever I had been in that room before 9:47 p.m., forgettable, background, safe, I was no longer that. Junho's organization, whatever it is, whatever it does in rooms that don't exist in reservation systems, now had my face, my shift schedule, my patterns, my radius, the precise distance I keep from tables I don't want to get involved with, and the exact threshold at which I stop keeping it. I had spent 11 months building invisibility. In 1.3 seconds, it was gone. I still work Thursday nights at Sora. I've tried to understand why. I've offered myself the explanations that sound reasonable, the money, the routine, the fact that quitting would look like something, and I'm not sure I want it to look like anything. But I think the real answer is this. Leaving would mean it's finished, and I don't think it's finished. And some part of me, the same part that crossed that floor on 11 months of instinct, wants to be present for whatever comes next. 3 weeks after the incident, I found a card in my locker. No envelope, no name, no signature. Folded once, plain white stock, the kind you buy in bulk. One line, Table 6 thanks you for your service. And beneath it, a phone number. I have not called it. I want you to understand what it cost me not to call it. I am a person who notices things and acts on them. Not calling that number is the most sustained act of will I have performed in my adult life. Every Thursday morning, I check the third drawer from the top in my kitchen, under the takeout menu, under the transit card, and I confirm that it's still there, that I still haven't called, that the choice is still technically mine. I don't know if Park Junho is alive. I don't know if the woman in the uniform was ever found, or tried again, or is standing right now in someone else's kitchen, learning their camera angles in under 2 seconds, pressing something flat and dark against her forearm, waiting for the room to empty. I don't know if there will be another Thursday where the pitcher shakes. Actually, I do know that. The pitcher shakes every Thursday now. That part never stopped. What stopped was the certainty that shaking meant something had gone wrong. Now I understand that shaking might mean I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. 3 weeks ago, I set the pitcher down at 9:47 p.m. and looked at table 6, empty, clean linen, 4 candles burning for no one, and my eyes went to the entrance door, not with anxiety, not with dread, but with the patient, settled certainty of someone who cannot see what's coming through it and has decided to stay in the room. I'm still working Thursdays, and I still haven't decided if that makes me brave or exactly what someone needs me to be. Not following yet? Drop 1 word in the comments what you would have done with that phone number. I read every single one.